to learn. Carlos is an amazing young man. Learning about where he has been and where he wishes to go with his life has left me completely humbled. He is dedicated and fully invested in his education. He truly loves to learn. He has a passion for math, and his goal is to go into the financial field after graduating from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Go Mustangs! He enjoys helping others succeed. Please join me in congratulating Carlos Arevalo Escobar.
Well, we just did that in record time. I can't believe it. But we just honored 30 students, and that is fabulous. It's a way to end the school year. There's somewhere around 17 or 18 more days of school. Unbelievable. And this is just the beginning for you parents and for the students, because you have 5th, 8th, and 12th graders, so you'll be attending promotions and graduations. So enjoy it. It's an exciting time of year for you. So let's give the students one last round of applause. And thank you, Judy, and thank you, Henry and Coy, for being here and for helping honor these students. We appreciate the partnership. So for the board, our next portion of the meeting will begin at 7 or about 5 to 7. So we'll just recess for the time being, and then we'll reconvene back at 6:55 and start the rest of the meeting. So thank you very much. I'm missing one trustee. I apologize. Oh, there she is. Welcome, everybody. We're going to bring the board meeting back into session. We went into a recess because we originally started at 6 o'clock where we honored 30 students for a NISA award, which is a Novato Inspirational Achievement Student Award. And so that was our first hour, and then we went into a recess. So I'm bringing it back in to an open session. So we won't do the Pledge of Allegiance, all that, because we've already done that. Couple housekeeping notes. If you would like to fill out a blue card, they are out in the foyer, I believe, which is where they always are. And we have Leslie and Yancy, these two people right here, who can collect them. You can bring them up to Gladys here. We just put it in the pile, and we'll start going. So I want to go over a couple protocols. One thing is, though, we're missing one trustee. Trustee Tom Cooper, our board president, is out of the country, but he is here with his voice. His voice is here, and he's hearing everything. And he's part of the decision tonight as well. So I am the acting board president. Trustee Nell is our acting vice president, and that's how we'll proceed. So for the blue card, since I mentioned those, you will have 3 minutes to speak, and we are going to hold you to the 3 minutes. We do have a timer, and this is something we do for every board meeting. It's not any different. I just want to reiterate it publicly because there's so many people, and this is a very passionate topic, and I want to make sure everybody understands how we're going to proceed. And being that is very passionate, there's a lot of strong emotions on both sides, and we've asked everyone for empathy and understanding. We want to be professional in how we do this, and we want to be professional here, and we want to respect each other. So when a person comes up to comment, let's allow them to comment. I do not want any outbursts from the audience. Let's just hold that. Let's let the person voice their opinion, and the board, it will definitely listen, and we have been listening as a board. I know our trustees, we all know each other. We have read everything. We have read this binder, which is all the information. We're probably over 1,000 emails that we've received over the course of this process, and we have read those emails. So you can see everybody shaking their head. So know that we have done our homework, and this is, again, I want to reiterate, though, that I haven't said it, this is not a approval or denial of lights tonight. This is a certification of an environmental impact report, and we will decide that at the end of this evening. So I know we've gotten a lot of emails in regards to support and things like that. We are not making that decision this evening. That decision will come before the board on May 30th. And we are looking at moving that board meeting to San Marin High School because of the volume of people. We want to make sure we can accommodate everybody. You can see it's starting to get a little tight in here. So we have decided to move that to San Marin High, and that will be at 7 o'clock on May 30th. For board members, there won't be any closed session. We'll just go straight there. And we'll make sure Jim will follow up with that additional information for you. We do have a limit of 10 o'clock this evening. I do have, again, quite a few blue cards. So we'd like to hold that to 10 o'clock. If you've heard your opinion expressed, your thoughts expressed, and you said, God, that's already been said, we don't need to hear it 3 more times, you can pass once I call your name. You can say, I'm fine. You cannot yield your time to somebody else. So we're just going to, everybody gets 3 minutes, but you can't yield any of your additional time to anybody else. Let's see. I think that's about it. Yeah, and you can take less than 3 minutes if you'd like, if you see that, which would be helpful. I mean, we value your input and everything, but again, we also want to be respectful of everybody's time. It's going to be probably a long evening. So a couple things that we need us to do as a board. We have a couple consent items that we just need to move through. We have 2 items on our consent agenda. I don't have any public comment regarding those 2 consent items. Nell is moving the consent agenda, and Trustee Nell second. Favor to approve the consent agenda. Trustee Cooper?
Cooper is aye.
Okay. 7-0 to approve the consent agenda. All right. Non-agenda public comment. I have 1 item. This is Dorothy Thomas. So if you could, come up to the podium, and everybody, you'll come up to the podium. What I'll do is probably call out meeting location.
Dorothy in Novato High School, and I'm sure I'm going to be the fastest speaker you've heard tonight. I need 1 minute to tell you that I just wish to protest the changes that have been made in the meeting locations. This is not one time. You've got one that you have a card out there now saying that the meeting held on the 30th of May is changed to San Marin High. And I think there have been 2 or 3 previous dates that have been changed. And I wish to say that you lose people. Every time you change something, you're going to lose somebody because you do not have real good publicity out there. The Novato Advance, I've written to them and told them about the meetings, but I don't think you really cover them. And I think the IJ isn't doing a good job either. So that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
I appreciate that input, and just one other comment. We did get a concern about the postings of meetings. We have a Board of Trustee requirement that we post our meetings 72 hours in advance. And so we did have that posted. We have it posted physically on the buildings. We have it posted on our website on the school board. And we also had it posted on a sliding posting. And that sliding posting had an incorrect link initially. But because we did have the other 2 that were posted, that meets the legal requirements. So I want to cover that. In terms of, we do not move locations. As long as I've been here, we've never had a meeting at a different location. I think the one again on the 30th, we want to make sure that everybody wants to be in the room, can be in the room. We want to make sure we can accommodate everyone. And the last one is we have moved some meeting times, and some of that we've done because this has been a fairly fluid process. We've extended public comment a few times for different reasons. So the board understands that we like to stick to that schedule, but sometimes things come up, and you can always find that information on our website. And that's really the best way to find out about our meetings. We can't always send everything out, but I think if you check out our website, that's really the best time to find the time and the place. Thank you.
Okay, and then regarding the non-agenda public comment, the board doesn't reply to that comment, so that's why you're not hearing from them. Couple things for the trustees in regards to when we move in. Now we're going to move into the discussion items, and you'll see on number 12 we have A through H listed. And so what I'm going to do is call up the presenter, and they will present, and then I will turn it back to the board once that presenter is done and get some clarifying questions or questions you'd like to ask that presenter for that particular item. So we'll do that for each one of those. We'll go back to the board. And then the public comment will come once we've heard all the presentations from 8 items that we've heard. Then we'll go to public comment, which will entail the blue cards. So I just want to make sure everybody understands the process. Yes, Trustee Miller?
To be clear, we're going to go A, B, C through H?
Yes.
And then take public comment,
Correct.
which would have been item I if it had been here, but...
Correct.
Yeah, okay, cool.
That's how we'll proceed. Okay,
Thank
and then
you.
we'll go, and then I'll come back to the board once public is done. Okay. So, so our discussion item is the final environmental impact report, the EIR, if you've heard it. And the first item is A12A, San Marin Stadium Lights Project Background and Timeline. And I will turn that over to Superintendent Hogaboom.
Thank you, Trustee Butler. So I just kind of want to run through for the board and the audience kind of a brief summary of how we got to where we are tonight. It really started back in October of 2015 when a group of parents and boosters approached myself who were interested in bringing the issue of lights for San Marin to the school board. So it wasn't something that the district initiated. I had just been hired actually in July. I think the Pony Express ran an article. That was the first time that I read about it. So that group came to us, and that kind of kicked off the whole process. The objectives of the proposal, once the project were written up, there were 6 of them. And these are all in the environmental impact report. The first one is provide extended availability of the athletic fields to improve academic performance by minimizing early class dismissal and missed instructional time for student athletes. Number 2, allow for the scheduling of games at times when students, parents, and community members can more easily attend the events. Number 3, provide nighttime opportunities for students to gather to cheer on their team, offering an alternative to going to parties or other unhealthy recreational activities. Number 4, improve athletic safety by providing superior lighting conditions during evening practices and sporting events. Number 5, improve safety by minimizing incompatible uses from sharing the field. And number 6, improve the public address system to focus on and contain sound within the stadium. So those were the 6 main objectives. I'm going to really highlight real quickly the key dates. So on May 17th, the Board of Trustees approved a contract with Rincon and Consultants, who's here tonight, to provide the California Environmental Quality Act, otherwise known as CEQA, compliance, including preparation of environmental impact report for the proposed stadium lights. On August 25th, Rincon sent out a notice of preparation and an initial study to the district. On September 7th, a scoping meeting was held at San Marin High with about 70 people there to receive comments on the initial report. On December 20th, the draft environmental impact report was released, which started the public comment period. On January 24th, the board held a special meeting to hear public comments on the draft EIR. At the next regular board meeting on January 31st, the board was asked and voted to extend the public comment period to March 3rd, which was to allow more time for feedback and a site visit to Hillsdale High School, where the board and I think about 20 community members went to check out the lights that are being proposed for San Marin. So that was, again, done at the request of the public to allow more time for discussion after people went on that visit. On April 8th, the initial release of the final EIR, including 97 comment letters, was posted on the district's website. On May 2nd, the board moved the EIR approval from when it was originally scheduled on May 2nd to May 16th to allow more time for the final EIR to be completed, and an additional 58 comment letters were received. The final EIR concludes that most of the potential impacts analyzed in the draft environmental impact report, including aesthetics, air quality, cultural resources, greenhouse gas emissions, and transportation and traffic, were less than significant or less than significant with mitigation. The final EIR identified one potential impact, noise associated with a limited number of activities on the field, as significant and unavoidable. Because of the large number of public comments and required responses, the final EIR, which you can see binders over there, was 873 pages, not including the appendices. So I guess that's just kind of a recap of where we've been. I would like to reiterate that I think the board has done due diligence in terms of their study of this issue, including all 7 board members going down to Hillsdale High School. In addition, 5 of the board members, including myself, have visited neighbors' homes where we were invited to kind of hear the noise levels and things from the activities going on there. In my count, there were 7 public meetings that anyone could have come to comment on this one way or the other. There were other smaller meetings. We had meetings with the police chief. We had meetings to discuss safety, those kind of meetings for those. We have 2 last meetings today. We have a final community outreach meeting. And there we're talking about if the lights are approved, what are the safeguards that we can put in place with the neighbors to try to mitigate the impacts. And then we have the final meeting on May 30th. So I think we've had substantial public input. I think the board has been actively involved. And again, I think the one thing the community can expect is that the board has done homework, that they've considered both sides of the issue, that they've read every public comment, which I know they have. And then again, that's their final call. But I think what we can expect is for them and for us to have done our homework, and I think that's been done. And with that, that's my report.
Back to the board. Any questions, comments for Superintendent Hogaboom? No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Our next item is 12B. This is an overview of the California Environmental Quality Act, the CEQA, and EIR process. This is Bryce Chastain, who's from Atkinson, Andelson, Rudd, and Romo, excuse me.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, my name is Bryce Chastain. I'm partnered with Atkinson, Andelson, Lawyer, Root, and Romo. We're the largest school law firm in California. We provide complete suite of services to schools, including all their facilities needs and CEQA. And we're going to do a brief overview of CEQA as it relates to the EIR process that the board has been going through here. So the first is, there are three keys to successful compliance. And this is in a general overview of any CEQA process that a public agency does. The first is full and complete public disclosure of the facts that are reasonably ascertainable on a given project and the potential environments on the physical environment, potential impacts on the physical environment. Then there are findings by the public agency, by its governing body, supported by substantial evidence in the administrative record. We're going to spend some time on later slides talking about what substantial evidence is. In a nutshell, substantial evidence is sometimes heard as being something weighty or large or superseding. In the law, substantial evidence just means something of substance, something to hang your hat on, something that gives rational support to the conclusions you're coming to. And then compliance with the procedural requirements of CEQA, which have all been followed slavishly here, including a lengthened public comment period and an even greater engagement with the public and comments from the public than the law necessarily requires. So what we're talking about doing tonight is just certification of an EIR. There's another step we'll talk about on the next slide, but for tonight's purposes, what the board is being asked to do is say that the EIR complies with CEQA requirements, that it reflects this agency's independent judgment and analysis, and that it's presented to this decision-making body, that they've reviewed, that they've considered the information in it, and they're exercising their own independent judgment on coming to the conclusions that they reach as to whether or not to certify the EIR. Only after this certification of the EIR would the board consider approving the project. Project approval triggers some other requirements that we just don't deal with tonight. This is just to certify tonight whether the EIR is complete and is certified acceptable to the board. Before there's a project approval, the board would have to do one of these three things. Either determine that the project as approved will not have a significant effect on the environment. That is not where the EIR leads us. Find that the project as approved will have eliminated or substantially lessened or all significant effects when feasible. We'll talk a little bit about feasibility because that'll be important in the next steps. And then for any significant impacts that the body determines cannot be mitigated, they can adopt a statement of overriding concerns that states the findings that when balanced against the project's benefits, the unmitigated impacts are still acceptable. Something that is a foundation of CEQA is that as we develop this body of evidence, and we have substantial evidence on all of these key decisions to be made, as long as that is all in the administrative record, the governing body has discretion to draw any reasonable conclusion from that evidence. The definition of feasible is capable of being accomplished in a successful manner within a reasonable period of time, taking into account economic, environmental, legal, social, and technological factors. Some of the things that are presented in the EIR with regard to the noise in particular are that after all of the reasonably cost-effective measures are taken to mitigate the noise, to have a certain volume that is effective, there's a certain point where we just can't mitigate the sound anymore without obviating the use of the sound system. So that is presented forthrightly in the EIR. What is substantial evidence? Under Natural Resources Code 21080, we begin with subsection E2. It is not argument, speculation, unsubstantiated opinion, or narrative. It's evidence that is clear or evidence that is clearly inaccurate or erroneous, or evidence of social or economic impacts that do not contribute to or are not caused by physical impacts on the environment. So again, we're just looking for hard data on physical impacts on the environment. Under 21082.2, we further expand the definition of substantial evidence. The lead agency will determine whether a project may have a significant effect on the environment based on substantial evidence in light of the whole record. The EIR itself has many appendices. It makes reference to various studies. The entire administrative record is the source of the evidence that the board is going to use to make a decision, one way or the other on certification. Substantial evidence will include facts, reasonable assumptions predicated upon facts, and expert opinion supported by facts. The EIR contains a number of segments that were prepared by experts, for example, on potential wildlife impacts, potential light pollution impacts, potential sound pollution impacts. And they based this all on some kind of hard data and then their reasoned expert opinion based on their experience and expertise. Under Guidelines Section 15.151, and the CEQA guidelines are all Title 14 of the California Administrative Code, otherwise known as the California Code of Regulations. This reiterates the Natural Resources Code and expands. Enough relevant information and reasonable inferences from this information that a fair argument can be made to support a conclusion, even though other conclusions might also be reached. Whether a fair argument can be made is to be determined by examining the whole record before the lead agency. So again, what we're trying to stress is, once there's the substantial evidence in the record, the agency is entitled to exercise any reasonable discretion in coming to conclusions based on that evidence. Under section, oh, I see what happened. See, I was a little thrown by that. I had a big blank space at the top of my slide. Section 15.151 of Title 14. The requirement is not perfection, but adequate inquiry, completeness, and a good faith effort at full disclosure. One can imagine that in investigating impacts on the physical environment, there is potentially no end of inquiry. There can always be some kind of further investigation in some kind of detail. But CEQA recognizes that what we're looking for is a reasonable inquiry, a reasonable development of the available facts. The CEQA requirement for an EIR is whether the decision of the public agency is supported by substantial evidence. This is from the California Supreme Court. Under the substantial evidence standard, no other body can substitute its judgment for the policy decision of the lead agency. For this reason, a lead agency decision should be upheld if there's any substantial evidence in the record to support its decisions. It's a key point that when anyone is reviewing a CEQA decision, the conclusions based on the facts are always debatable. But the way that this is dealt with legally is, again, as long as there's substantial evidence and a reasoned argument that leads to the conclusions of the public agency, those conclusions are given deference and they're upheld. Unless the lead agency's determination is not grounded upon reasonable factual basis, no other body may interfere with the lead agency's discretion or substitute their discretion for that of the lead agency. Under the substantial evidence standard, the lead agency is entitled to all reasonable inferences from the evidence that would support the agency's determinations, and all conflicts in the evidence must be resolved in favor of the lead agency's decision. A quick note on what the code says, and the courts say about speculation. Considering speculative potential effects of a future project is not required for an EIR. Speculative impacts that are unsupported by evidence do not have to be addressed in an EIR, which must deal only in substantial evidence as described in the code and the guidelines. This is always an issue with CEQA, is differing inferences, differing concerns, differing worries about what a project might bring. CEQA actually says that we should not be speculative, that any of the conclusions that are drawn have to be based in some kind of hard fact, some kind of hard evidence. And so that evidence is built into the record. When the comments come in, they're sorted through to look for anything that is hard data. If hard data comes in, that data has to be dealt with, and it was in several cases in this process. It is normal in these CEQA processes for concerns to be raised, for worries about potential impacts to be raised. But if we don't have evidence put before the body, they're really not supposed to consider any kind of speculative impact. A quick note on site exemption. So under the government code, defines building ordinances as ordinances of a county, city, regulating building and construction, removal of buildings, including ordinances relating to building permits and building inspections. Now, generally, the government code says that all local agencies must comply with local building ordinances. But we just wanted to reiterate that the government code expressly carves out an exception for school districts and allows them to exempt themselves from local building ordinances. The reason being is this. You could put a school in an area zoned commercial, in an area zoned residential. Almost no matter where you put a school, it can't match a residential zoning restriction, a commercial zoning restriction. They require the breadth to perform their special mission of educating kids. It's unlike anything else, frankly, that we do. And so it is ubiquitous that school districts opt into this power to exempt themselves from local building ordinances, because if they don't, they simply can't run a school site effectively. Questions?
Oh, questions. Back to the board. Questions, comments? Trustee Millerick? Okay. Trustee Aguila? Okay. Trustee Mack? Trustee Scott? Trustee Cooper? Any questions?
No questions right now.
Okay. Thank you so much. There might be some more later on. So.
Certainly. I'll be here.
The next item is the final EIR overview. This is Dave Leader from Rincon, Rincon Consultants. And, Abe, I know you have 2 items there. On the 2 items, it's an hour to just stay up there and
President Butler?
Yes.
So for some people who don't have the agenda before them, can you just call out the letter that we're on? Because they know
Yes,
we're getting to letter
you're
I.
right. Thank
So they
you.
can mentally track how we
This
stand.
is 12C, final EIR overview with
Okay, thank you, Madam Vice President and board members. My name is Abe Leader. I'm with Rincon Consultants. We are the firm that assisted your staff in preparing the environmental impact report and going through the CEQA process. I don't want to be too redundant with the last presenter. I'll try to skip things if they are, but essentially what's important to take away from this list of the purposes of CEQA is that it's really a disclosure law. It's about information for your board. It's one of several pieces of information or types of information that you're going to have before you when you make your decision on the project when that date comes, which is not tonight. An EIR, as an informational document, it doesn't make recommendations on whether to approve or deny a project, whether a project is bad or good. It really, again, as the previous speaker said, it's focused on physical impacts on the environment. This is a flow chart of the process that you probably can't read from where you're sitting unless it's on your laptop. But essentially what it shows maybe from afar is that there's a number of steps to the CEQA process, and each of them involves an opportunity for public input and then an opportunity for your staff to develop the responses to it and develop the information that's before you tonight. We are now near the end where the yellow oval is, where the district considers the final EIR. The steps before include scoping, where we ask the public, what should we be looking at in this EIR? What's important environmentally? And then we take the scoping comments and prepare a draft EIR that goes out to the public for at least 45 days. In your case, I think it was in the 70s. And they tell us, what did we miss? What did we get wrong? And then we take all that information back, respond to those comments item by item, and provide you the final EIR for your consideration. So this chart just has all the steps in it. Timeline, superintendent already went over this a little bit, but started really back in August with the notice of the issuance of the notice of preparation. That was the scoping period. There was a hearing that's not listed here. The scoping period itself was 30 days. The IR comment period, again, was 28 days longer than the required 45. And then as far as the project timeline, it's projected, if it's approved, for fall of 2017. So at our last presentation before you, I think we talked about the draft EIR. So that was probably a detailed conversation where we told you all about the impacts and what was determined in the draft EIR. Now what's before you is the final EIR, and what really is the making of that EIR, the final, was all the public comments that we received. So there's about 155 comment letters. Actually, they came mostly by email. Out of those, about 125 individual commenters. There were some people that wrote several letters. A lot of those letters just expressed support for the project without environmental information, and a lot of them also expressed the opposite without environmental information. But several of those letters had constructive, specific comments that asked us to look at something. Maybe we missed this. We asked us to look at it a different way. And so that is the changes to the EIR that you see in the final, and also the responses to those comments. I know you've read the whole thing, but I'll just go over what some of the main recurring themes in the comments were. People were concerned about the lighting impacts, and did we analyze them correctly? Biological resources impacts was a thing that came up a lot. Of course, noise. There were some traffic concerns. Public service and safety was a recurring theme. Non-CEQA or non-environmental questions such as the cost of the project came up quite a bit. And then questions about the project alternatives or concerns about those. So as you'll see in the final EIR up at the front of Section 8, we crafted master responses for several of those categories to make it easier for the public to go back and see sort of one-stop shopping for many of the concerns that came up many times. And then after that, we looked at each comment letter individually, and where something was not mentioned in the master response, we responded to each one of those individually. Again, people who commented, or you when you're reading the final EIR, you'll notice that some comments went through quicker and some took longer, and that's because, again, as the previous speaker said, we're focused on physical impacts to the environment and on hard data that challenges or questions or adds something to the EIR discussion. So a concern about noise that's general, very important concern for your board to think about, but in the EIR, we are not able to give a specific response to a concern that is not itself specific. So a few changes from the draft EIR to the final EIR that were based on these many comments that we received, and many of them very, very good comments. We added some details to the project description where there was something that was hanging out there as a question that people didn't understand completely, or that weren't in the first round. For example, the precise timing of construction that's proposed, some of the program details about events and processes on the field, a little bit about the design illumination specifics of the lighting system, and again about the schedule. And I think there's a new table in the EIR that gives those details more in a different format that's maybe easier for people to understand. Again, this isn't new information. For the most part, it's information presented in a way that's clear, or details that were added. Again, biological resources was a recurring comment, and we agreed with the commenters that it would be helpful to have more information to support the conclusion. So the conclusions of significance regarding biological resources stayed the same, but we added more information for the reader to understand how we got to those conclusions. In the aesthetic section, we added some clarity, really drawing on information that was already in the project description about what the physical construction would be and what the physical components of the project would be. We clarified the use of upward-facing lights, how often and when, and we added some discussion of other events, non-varsity football activity noise levels to help augment the noise discussion and support those conclusions. One important change to the final EIR, and in a minute I'm going to talk briefly about all the alternatives that were looked at and sifted through in that analysis and what made it into the EIR discussion. One alternative that was many members of the public were interested in seeing more information about was the IVC, the offsite alternative at the Indian Valley campus. So we took that from an alternative that was looked at but then rejected as infeasible to not get a full analysis, and we brought it into the full analysis of alternatives. So in other words, instead of just looking at it and saying this one's not going to work, we said, let's give it a full airing. We discussed the impacts. Aesthetic and noise impacts would be reduced under that alternative, but other noise impacts, other impacts may be greater. And as with the other impacts, the trade-offs as with the other alternatives, the trade-offs on impacts are a little bit up and down. Some things would be more severe, some things less so. However, at the end, we concluded, based largely on a letter received from the city manager of Novato, that use of that field is not feasible. It's not a feasible alternative. The school district doesn't have the opportunity to make use of that alternative, even if it wished to, based on programming there and based on an agreement with College of Marin and the city. So all that information is in the responses to comments in the master response about alternatives. So again, we received all the comments, we responded to them, we made changes to the final EIR. And this allowed for clarifications, minor corrections, and additions to the EIR, but it did not result in substantial changes to impact levels or identification of new impacts or other significant new information that would require a reprocessing of the CEQA document. And that's the way CEQA, frankly, is supposed to work. It's a very, very public process. All the drafts are looked through by the public, and it's almost good to have a lot of people working on the final result. Again, just to go over the alternatives, about 10 alternatives were looked at in the EIR, in the draft EIR, including off-site alternatives, including on-site fields, reduction in number of events, and many of them were considered but rejected as not feasible because they just wouldn't meet the objectives of the project. The district has a reason for pursuing this, and if the alternative wouldn't allow them to meet those objectives, it's not necessary to pursue it any further. So the first alternative was no project, which is actually required by CEQA that the district look at a no project alternative, which is things stay as they are now. The second alternative was stadium lighting at a different site, Novato High School. The third was using portable lighting systems, which many school districts actually do, instead of permanent light fixtures. And the fourth new alternative brought into the discussion was the IVC existing fields. And again, I won't go through I think we're already running out of time, but I'll just point out again that for the most part, there's trade-offs and impacts when you look at alternatives in comparison with the proposed project, which is what we're asked to do in CEQA. So for some, there's maybe a greater aesthetic impact, but a lower impact on cultural resources or greenhouse gases, depending on things like travel to and from the stadium. For the fourth alternative, for the IVC existing fields, that's just the one that wasn't discussed in detail in the draft EIR. The aesthetics impacts would be reduced in that alternative due to distance from residences, similar impacts as far as ground disturbance on cultural resources, and slightly increased impacts related to traveling back and forth and air emissions and traffic related to that. This alternative would have reduced the significant noise impact due to distance from sensitive receptors. And finally, to conclude, a little bit about EIR certification, and I think the previous speaker mentioned this. Certification of the EIR is not the same as approval of the project. That's happening for your board, or is scheduled for your board for a different date. The EIR is just an informational document among the many sources that you'll be drawing from when you make that decision, and it doesn't include a recommendation on the project. The district's obligations under CEQA and environmental oversight wouldn't end with certification. There's still mitigation measures that have to be carried out. Some of them are before project construction, like the photometric plan analysis to be sure that those impacts are kept the way that they were analyzed below thresholds in the EIR. Some happen during construction, like having a training for workers to make sure that they don't damage cultural resources. So it's just to reiterate that the district's responsibilities don't end at certification. And finally, if the project changes, if something is proposed eventually that's not within what we studied in the EIR, then that would have to be looked at again under CEQA.
Okay. Back to the board. Trustee Millerick.
So I have one question to pose now, but I don't know if now is the right time to answer it. In your evaluation in AES 4, you identified, and you can do this from memory, the light criteria is E3 versus E2, and I would like to have a conversation about that criteria at the appropriate time. And I think we're maybe early in the I don't know. I mean,
Madam Vice Chair and Vice President and Board Member Millerick, I'm happy to start that conversation now, and if we need to come back to it, we can. But there are criteria for those lighting zones. They're fairly easy to understand. So the E2 zone is described by the promulgating group of those lighting zones as rural residential. An example of rural residential would be if you were to go up to Petaluma and then head west. These are typically large lot, large lot subdivisions, like for equestrian uses or small farms. They're out on a rural road. Sometimes there aren't even lights, street lights on the road. They're certainly not surrounded by small lot residential subdivisions and condominiums and shopping centers. They are more like what you see out to the west. The E3 zone is for a more suburban context, like we're discussing. We have it lighting. We can talk more about it later, but it fits into that category. A rural residential is E2, and that's not where we are in this. Okay.
Anybody else? Regarding? No? Trustee Cooper? Anything?
Fine for now.
You're fine for now, okay. And then your next item, I think you kind of already,
Alternatives was part of that, thank you, yeah.
yes, that was part of the alternatives. The item, let me just reiterate for everybody, 12D was consideration for alternatives, and that was worked in within the presentation we heard. And the attachment that was with the agenda was the letter from the city manager, Regan. Candelario, thank you. So you've already spoke that. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to, and please obviously stay around for. We will move on to 12E. This is light and system details. This is Jason Denise, yes, from Musco. Musco, excuse me. I keep saying Musco. Sorry.
Okay, my dad worked for Musco Olives, and I still can't get him trained on it. So, hello everyone. Good evening. My name is Jason Denise, and I'm the local manufacturer's rep for Musco Lighting. I've been with Musco for over 14 years. Here just to briefly talk about what we take into consideration when we do lighting designs for any football stadium. For 40 plus years, we've been developing products with three purposes in mind. First one being player safety. We want to make sure there's adequate lighting out there for our high school kids, little league players. So safety is our number one concern. Two, energy efficiencies. I think we all can agree that's important. Lastly, controlling spill light and glare and being a good neighbor. We pride ourselves in being a responsible neighbor. Each project is unique and no one project is alike. Our engineering staff evaluates every project with our neighbors in mind. Some stadiums we design with 4 poles if the surrounding neighborhood is not very close in proximity. And others, such as San Marin High, we design with 8 poles and approximately 80-foot mounting heights to control the trespass of light and more specifically glare. One of the biggest misnomers in sports lighting is we need short poles so we don't see the light, when in actuality, the taller you can get with your lights, the steeper of an angle you can put, therefore reducing trespass light and glare. Our engineering staff has done an incredible job producing 40-foot candles on the field here at San Marin High, while reducing the spill values to nearly 0 and keeping the candela values in the hundreds at the property line. As I mentioned before, it's our goal and responsibility to be a good neighbor. That's exactly what the community of Novato will receive with our engineered lighting design and system.
Okay.
Short and sweet.
Yeah.
More than happy to answer any questions.
Questions, or we'll wait till after? We're good? Everybody's good. Trustee Millerick.
That speaks to the 8 poles. Is there information available on egress lighting that would be available? There's, I can't remember the count, 20 or some other number of poles that are shorter. Do you have information on those as well?
Yeah, I can't speak to the egress lighting because that was designed by, I think, the electrical engineer of record. That wasn't done by Musco Lighting.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Nope. Trustee Cooper, are you good?
Yeah, I have a quick comment on that. I'd like to add that on I think it was the January 24th meeting, I made a comment that I had requested a photometric study be included in the EIR. And since that time, I've had an opportunity to review the preliminary one that is included in the EIR, as well as visiting the Hillsdale High School campus with many of you. And so I'm willing to, at this point, I've considered it at length, and I've decided that I can go ahead and approve this, or approve of waiting to do a preliminary study or a photometric study, that can be done at a future date once the final design is done for the lights.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anybody else? All right. Thank you. Please stick around. This is the item 12F, draft schedule of events. We're going to hear from Dennis Davis and Ben Philpott. Yes. Hi.
Hi. So I'm sure most people have seen the draft schedule. Do you guys have a copy of that?
Can you just state your title?
Oh, yes. My name's Dennis Davis, athletic director at San Marin, co-athletic director.
Ben Philpott, teacher and coach at San Marin High School.
I'm going to pull it up. So I can kind of speak a little bit about the background of where this calendar came from, just briefly. at one point there was just a number that was thrown out for a possible number of events. And when that number kind of got really big, people were saying, why are you having 300 events or whatever it was? And it was like almost more days than there were in a year. And so we're like, okay, we need to kind of get a grasp on what's actually going to be happening at San Marin. So we set out to provide the neighborhood in an effort to be a good neighbor, with a calendar that kind of outlaid, like day by day, what would happen in a typical year at San Marin. Obviously, these numbers can't be 100% accurate because we don't know from year to year what's going to happen, but this is the basic of what it would look like. So we kind of went month by month. I think the biggest things that I want to make sure that we point out is that in an effort to be a good neighbor, we've trimmed back a lot of the things that typical schools that have lights would rent their field out for most of the year. So we've made it part of our EIR that we're not going to rent the field out, which limits the number of days that we use the lights, which was a major factor in our efforts to be good neighbors. The other thing is that we're not going to use it for practices outside of daylight savings time. So that was kind of another major concession that we made, and again, in an effort to kind of work with the neighborhood to provide what our students need without being overly invasive. So if you look in August, there's 2 days that they would use light usage. Those again are just football games. I think it's one varsity game, one freshman game, the 25th and 26th. We typically have games during that time. But if you notice, there's no practices because it wouldn't be needed at that time for the teams that we have going. If you go through September, similar thing, no practices, just the football games that were on there. Keep going down. I don't know. Most people have seen this. So I don't want to go every day, day by day. But you notice, so here, the new thing that they asked us, the neighborhood asked us to do, if we could provide the sunset time. So if you see starting on October 3rd, you see that the sunset's at 6:49. We put originally that lights would be 6 to 8. We kind of said that they need to be on about 20 minutes to a half hour before the sunset. So instead of 6 o'clock, the lights would be on, they might be on at 6:15 that night. And you could see so on and so forth as it goes on throughout the thing. So this is kind of when lights start kicking in, and it's just because of when the sun sets, then we start using it. So if you go into November, kind of a similar thing. So it's a few weeks before daylight savings, and it's just whenever the sun starts setting sooner than when we need it to go. So keep going down. I mean, it's the same thing. I don't have to go day by day with every single one, but you guys kind of get the gist of it. Do you want me to go all the way through? Okay, so yeah, so if we could jump down, so December soccer and lacrosse is kind of the biggest need for it. So the lights again would be on, if we look at like January, for example, there's boys and girls soccer games. Right now during the winter we have four soccer teams, 2 varsity, 2 JV teams, all trying to practice in about 2 hours of daylight on one practice field. That's adequate for what they need. And that's not included on game days where the other teams don't even have an opportunity to practice, or they're on a muddy field that when it rains is the district asks us, or like we're not supposed to be using because it's going to destroy the field. So this is kind of one of the most impacted months. And again, we put lights 4 to 8 on all of those days. But if you notice, the sun sets at 5:23, so maybe they'll be on at 5 o'clock instead of 4 o'clock. Again, as an effort to minimize the amount of light usage that we're using. And then when we go down into February, this is kind of one of the things is when our spring sports kind of overlap with the winter sports. So we have 4 soccer teams, 4 lacrosse teams, 3 baseball teams, a track team. Am I missing anything? Softball. So there's a ton of things. So field space is at a premium. All of the upper fields are being used. One option is like, even if we put a second field up, which has been brought up a lot of times, those would be used by the baseball at this time, which it doesn't really free up. It doesn't solve the lacrosse problem. It doesn't solve the overlap with track and lacrosse and soccer. So having an extra field, while yes, it would help alleviate some of it, it wouldn't solve the problem that we're facing now with so many teams trying to share one space. Having the lights would allow us to practice later into the evening, allowing opportunities for all the students to have the safest practice facility that we can offer them. The other thing that's been brought up a few times is the neighbors have asked us to start the games earlier and earlier and earlier, and we've kind of, in a negotiation effort, we've pushed it as late as we could start the games. One of the main reasons is we'd like for a team to be able to practice. For example, if you notice, like the boys will play on the 8th, the girls on the 7th. So we'd like the girls to be able to practice prior to the game on the 8th. Does that make sense? So we want them to still have a practice and still be able to offer the game at the same time. And if we keep pushing the games up, then it's kind of right in that middle of the time where we wouldn't be able to offer both the practice and the game. So we've pushed it back. Basically, we've pushed it forward as early as we can to start the game to get them off at a reasonable time. Jump in? Yeah, go ahead.
Kind of just to touch on some things that Dennis was mentioning is I think adding the lights and keeping the game times a little later. I think the soccer games we have starting at 6. Compared to other leagues, they start their games at 7. Keeping it at 6 allows other teams to use the field before those games. And even off-season teams, I think the great thing about lights being added and what it does to this calendar is that it allows all outdoor teams to use the field more often. Just like the gym is used by volleyball and basketball throughout the year, they have that time to train and keep the kids active. It's a great way to keep touch with your kids as well. So I'd like that adds that to the outdoor field schedule. And I also, I think we touched on this. I'm not sure if it mentioned or not, but just keeping the kids in class during the days, starting the game times later means that kids will no longer miss class for home games, especially soccer games. And I think it's also worth mentioning we have 2 night soccer games a week as opposed to 4, being that we've kept those games on Saturdays during the day. We're not pushing those back to use the nighttime because obviously it's not necessary with the current schedule we have.
And then the last thing that I kind of want to really hit on is at the bottom, go to the very first page. The bottom of it talks about the total possible days, which is 152 for lights and then 41 for the PA. And then that asterisk at the bottom is that 24 of those days are possible MCAL and NCS playoff games. We had to put, per the ER, to put the kind of the maximum number, what it typically would be. This year, as I say, last school year, we hosted 4 playoff games of those possible 24. So that number would come down 20, and the PA usage would probably come down about 10 or 12 from that. And then this year, I think we're hosting 3 of those possible playoff games. So that number looks bigger than it actually will be. But again, that would be if every one of our teams made the MCAL championship and the NCS championships, and we were the highest seeded team of the 16 teams in our division to host the games. So it's unrealistic that we would ever hit that total number of 24 playoff games. It probably has never happened in the history of no school has probably ever hosted every possible playoff game. It just doesn't happen. So that number of 152 and 141 would probably look something around like a 135 and about 25 to 30 number. So, but again, we wanted to put kind of the worst case scenario from the neighbor's perspective, so that they kind of just knew what they were getting into. And again, I've said this at most of the meetings that we had, our goal is to be a good neighbor. Our goal is not to be on later than we have to be. We know that the kids have families. We know that they have homework. We know that they have prior obligations, and we want to be sensitive to them as well. And that when we say we're going to be done with practice at 8 o'clock, we're going to be done with practice at 8 o'clock. We're not trying to push things further and further and further than we have to do. So, any questions?
Trustee Miller.
Yeah, thank you very much. I looked at the report you just provided, and I tied it. I looked at the report in the EIR, and it looks like month by month. You brought it to the front page, and the numbers here tie to the number in the EIR report. That's what that's what you think they do as well, right? I wasn't. I did this quickly.
I hope so.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah,
okay. Just checking. So I want to make sure we're all working with the same numbers. So the only other comment,
sorry to interrupt. I think the sunset time may have been added after it was put into the EIR.
That's my next question.
Yeah, the sunset time was put in after that.
The sunset time, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So like on December 31st, the shortest day of the year, the sun goes down at 4:54, and the lights are on till 8 o'clock. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 3 hours beyond. But what's weird about that date, well, that's November, pardon me, I just lied. The December date is 4:53 shortest day. But the last 2 weeks of December, you've got lights on till 8, but I think everybody's in Christmas vacation, or pardon me, holiday vacation. So I'm wondering, so that's actually not my question, that's just an observation. Some of these dates in early December, you're on till 8:30, and I thought you said you just tonight said everything would be off by 8 every night. So,
So
like on the 6th and the 7th, you're on till 8:30. So what is the correct answer?
So if you see there, the lights, like on December 5th, the 8 o'clock is a practice day.
Yep.
The 8:30 is a game day.
Oh, so they go to 8:30 on game days and
Yeah.
they go to 8 on practice days. Is that?
And and that was allowing the time for for the game to end and be over. So anytime it was 8:30, that was a game time. And we're also in the process of working in the ARs through the district and trying to trim that back a little bit as well too.
But I'm trying to make sure I understand what's right in front of us tonight. And
Yes.
that's
Yeah,
your
yeah.
intention.
So that's the difference.
8:30 for games,
8
8:30
o'clock
for
for
practice.
practice.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the other thing to speak about, so for example, again, we had to put worst case scenario in the EIR. Finals week, the 19th to the 23rd of December. Our students are done at 12. Every coach, for example, boys soccer, we have an on-campus coach. They'll start their practices probably at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which means there may not be a need for those. So anytime, like I said, anytime that we can use it less, we will in terms of practice time. Again, if we can get our kids out home at 3 o'clock to study for their finals, that's awesome. So the days like that. So that's also over winter break. It won't be used as much as what's said on here, but again, we had to put worst case scenario. Same thing with Thanksgiving break as well.
Thank you very much.
Also, the winter season is November through February, which we don't want to be out there in the dark longer than we have to be because it's pretty cold.
It might even rain.
Yeah.
Trustee Mack.
Just one quick question, Dennis. What percentage of your coaching staff, so across, well, head coach, let's leave the head coaches, across all the sports are on campus versus walk-ons, volunteers, roughly?
I'm looking at my co-ADs to give me a solid number. I want to say we have 23 like varsity programs, and I think we have 5 on-campus coaches.
So it's safe to say the majority of your coaches are working full-time jobs?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Aguila.
Yeah. You answered the question also about Thanksgiving, because it almost seems like, my question was, were you conservative also by saying that they were going to play during Thanksgiving? So that, I noticed that it's 2016, the calendar. You just happen to use the year 2016.
Right.
To just as a template.
Yeah.
Right.
So the past few years, our football team has played past Thanksgiving or right around Thanksgiving. So again, we put it as worst case scenario. Thanksgiving Day, we would hope that we're not practicing, but we didn't want to put it as a definite, never under no circumstance. So it's there as an option. I would bet 9 out of 10 years, maybe 10 out of 10 years, there wouldn't be practice on Thanksgiving.
Okay. And just the wording on the bottom of the first page after the star, when you explain about what worst case scenario means, it's still a little unclear. If you could, it's not clear to me. So
Okay.
if you want to fix it or whatever and get rid of the 2016, we understand it's just a template, but
Okay. Okay.
Okay, Trustee Nell, sorry.
Yes, I wanted you to explain, like, on the unfortunate circumstance in a game situation that might be delayed for a long time, injury. This document has, like hard end times, but the reality is we're going to continue the game until it's over. So this, for purposes of demonstration, is what we have here in this document. But the actual EIR, where he's going to recognize or will recognize those unfortunate circumstances that we don't control.
Into the mic.
So if you'd answer, maybe you can answer my
Correct.
question.
So obviously the priority of the safety of the kids are our number one priority. So if a kid did get hurt, the game might go on a little bit longer. And I think we've made that very clear, and the neighborhood's been very receptive in all of our meetings. They're like, obviously, we're not going to ask you to turn it off in the middle of the game because a kid had a spinal injury or something and they had to bring the ambulance out. And I think that everybody would agree in the room. I would hope anyways that everyone would agree that if the game stayed on a little bit longer because we had a serious injury, that would be acceptable.
Essentially, I think what needs to be clear is that's what's going to happen.
Yes.
And that these demonstrated times that you have on the document could go longer on game days should we have circumstances like that we can't control. So I didn't want anyone to think that this current calendar and those hard ending dates are anything more than the estimated time of the end of the game.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody else? No? I know you've put a lot of time into this, so thank you, to make it as realistic as possible for us to present. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Trustee Cooper, sorry, did you have any questions regarding the calendar?
Yeah, I did. Thanks.
Oh, you gotta yell, speak up.
Okay, sorry. Ben and Davis, thank you very much for your presentation. I just wanted to confirm, could you go over Sunday, just confirm that what will be going on Sundays and what we're doing now on Sundays? If you could just talk a little bit about that, please.
So currently, right now, the Sundays are rented. The field is rented out for adult soccer leagues, which are very low attended in terms of fan base. And then it's also used by the Pop Warner teams 5 or 6 times a year for their home games. That's current practice. The new practice, should we proceed with the stadium lights, is that those Pop Warner games would move to Sunday morning, which would mean, to Saturday morning, which would mean there'd be no PA usage ever on a Sunday. And then the only thing that they would just continue renting it out to those adult soccer leagues during certain times of the year. That answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Trustee Aguila?
And the renting it would be during what time?
During daylight time. Typically on Sundays, it's the adult leagues are in the morning, so it would be no different than what we're doing now. Yeah, there would be no usage of the lights by outside user groups.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. 12G will be the Adam San Marin Public Address System, and this is Yancey Hawkins, the Assistant Superintendent of Business Operations, everything.
All right, thank you. So the 2 items that I'm going to bring are not directly related to CEQA, but we're bringing them up for 2 reasons. The first was that several comments within the EIR comment period asked about cost estimates and where the funding for the project would come for. And the other was at community meetings at San Marin High School. We heard similar questions to that, and we also wanted to give the board some information, obviously, before that May 30th meeting about costs and funding for the PA system and the larger lights project. Obviously, we will discuss these in much more depth on the May 30th meeting, but I wanted to get the information out there. In terms of the public address system, the estimated cost of that project is $245,000. These are initial estimates from our construction management firm, Greystone West, who was in charge of the Hillsdale project, which we went down and saw down in San Mateo. The project is recommended to be funded out of Fund 22, Measure G, and the staff believes that this project should be considered for approval by the Board of Trustees, whether or not the San Marin Lights project is approved. In terms of, if it's okay, we'll go through both items.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
In terms of the San Marin Athletic Fields Light project, there's 2 kind of cost estimates that I wanted to go over really quickly. The first is the construction cost of those projects. It is estimated that would be $1,165,000 based on, again, preliminary estimates from our construction management firm, Greystone West. That will include upgraded electrical infrastructure, security lighting poles and lighting, the 8-pole Musco lighting system and lights, and including installation for those projects. The recommendation from staff on this is that the cost would be split between the district's Facilities Fund 21, non-measure G, of just under $600,000, and the rest to be covered by donations and contributions from the community, including the San Marin Booster group. The other cost related to the project is the operating costs of this. The first is the operating cost of the lights specifically. These lights, we're lucky that it's not 15 years ago. These lights are LED lights, including the egress lighting. And so the estimated total cost for running the Musco lights, the 8-pole, which is a majority of the light usage, and then the egress lighting is about $5,250 annually for those costs. That's limited by the LED lights as well as the solar power that the district, which lowers our rate that we pay under our power purchase agreement with Tesla. The other is the operating and maintenance costs of those. Those are extremely limited by the fact that the 8 poles and light system by Musco is under a 25-year warranty. And so the majority of those costs, or all the costs related to maintenance for 25 years of the 8 pole and the lights, would be covered. And so we would be on the hook for just maintenance costs of the egress lighting. The other item in terms of operating costs was the cost of the nighttime events that would happen with the advent of the lights. And so through discussions with San Rafael and other local school districts who have lighting, they recommend, or the analysis was that the district could rely on at least $20,000 to $25,000 of additional revenue brought in, which should be more than sufficient to cover the cost of the additional event-related costs, including police, security, cleanup, and other event staffing. But I want to note that obviously those are still under investigation around the administrative regulations that will be. So with that, I know that there will be more discussion at the May 30th, but I'm happy to answer any questions now.
Trustee Millerick.
In terms of your cost for operating,
Yes.
you said that the gate would be greater by 25,000 you're estimating, and
Yes.
that would offset cleanup costs and
Security.
So
and
I'm accepting that those is good numbers, but my understanding is the gate for certain MCAL events is the property of the student body, not the property of the district. So that money's not, or the playoff games, the gate goes to CIF, Northern California Interscholastic Federation. So is all that revenue available to us, or could you clarify that? I'm just not familiar with the regs.
So a portion of that, yes, is given back to MCAL for any playoff events, but a majority of the ticket receipts are kept locally.
But not by the student body, they're kept by the district. They go in
the district can
general
make administrative regulations around where that funding is going. Different districts do it a variety of different ways, whether it goes to the district, whether it goes to the school sites, whether it goes to a student or even a sports-related group.
Okay, so it's at our discretion.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Anybody else regarding those? This is the cost for the public address system and cost for the field light project. Trustee Cooper?
Yes, thank you, Trustee Butler. To answer you a quick one, this is a kind of a rhetorical question, but can we use Measure G bond money for the lighting? I know you mentioned for the PA system, but specifically for the lighting, any of the lighting costs.
So the district has stated many times that it would not use Measure G funds for the lighting project.
Very well, thank you.
Trustee Nell, and then Trustee Mack.
My question in relation to public addresses is not so much the cost, but the purpose. And I wanted to know if we've looked into or verified educational code requirements and what the safety concerns would be with large crowds or operating a school event like this without a public address system in the event of an emergency. I think that the purpose for them is really for that. That's the main purpose, to have a public address system. While we have it, it's good that we can make announcements and play music, but I think it's important that we have safety as a major concern and a reason for justifying a public address system.
Absolutely.
Okay. Trustee Mack.
Yancy, yes. Could you address the shortcomings of the current PA system and what the objective is in replacing it?
My friends at Rincon could do a better job in terms of the scientific, but it's an older system, and it's not necessarily designed to be a directional sound system to keep all of the noise on the field. And so, therefore, the noise as many of the commenters during the EIR and at some of our community meetings have noted that noise spilled over. But I think anyone who was at the Hillsdale trip knew when they were playing music on the field, when I was walking down towards the field, even 30, 40 yards away, like I couldn't hear the music. So I think it's important to note that for one of the reasons the recommendation would be whether the board, staff's recommendation, whether the board approves the light project or not, is to improve that system and reduce the amount of volume from the PA system out in the neighborhood.
And just to follow up, just one last question. Is the current system digitally limited, like the one at Novato High, or is it just kind of just turn it on and adjust the volume manually?
While there are some settings, it's my understanding that there is wide latitude in the use of the PA system.
Okay. Trustee Miller.
This evening's conversation is about the environmental impact report, and I understand finance specifically is not part of that consideration. So I think this is a question outside of the scope of the EIR, maybe to be answered tonight or beyond. Your staff recommendation was that Fund 21 be used, a current district resource be used to fund the lights. My memory, and this is where I'm going to need your help, is Fund 21 monies were placed there by the board 2 years ago, and they were general fund monies, and the board could choose to move those, and they were set for some emergency reserve, but they could be moved back to the general fund and used for payroll or any other general fund purpose. I think they're not restricted, but you have the better records. I just have a vague memory, so I would not want to use funds that could be used for general fund purposes for lights. So if you could clarify what you know now, or at the next meeting when we are considering finances, have that information available for us.
I can have that information available at the May 30th meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Nope. Okay. Thank you, Yancy. All right, so we will move on. Those were all of our presentations as you saw, and we'll move on to public comment. So there's a good hour and a half right here. So if I give 3 minutes to each person, or you speak to 3 minutes, excuse me. So what I'll do is call out the first 3 names, and if you could just come up and line up, and then I'll go on to the next 3 after that once we've completed those. And again, 3 minutes, we have the timer right there, and I will cut you off. I hate to do that, but I will. I'll ask you to conclude your comments if you go beyond the 3 minutes. All right, so we have Robert Raven, Janice Gannon, and Chris Turner. And when you come up, please state your name again, and speak into the microphone, because we are televised.
Okay, right here?
Yep,
okay.
Perfect.
All right. One of my big issues is that all of our comments were considered speculation and basically not listened to or not adhered and not answered, and there was really no response to us about those. Well, the reason why we had to speculate is because there's no traffic study done yet. You guys are doing an EIR without a traffic study. You guys are doing an EIR without crowd estimates on these games. You're doing an EIR without any renderings. Like, my brother's an architect. They do renderings when they put a bench in. And you guys don't have renderings for this 80-foot towers plus 30-foot towers, and how would it look in daytime, at night? There's nothing. So, of course, we're doing it on speculation, because you haven't provided us any real information. They're even talking about the costs are now at $1.2 million now. I mean, everything's changing day by day, and so we're not getting the full information. So one reason I'm wearing this shirt here, it's an old shirt, and it's because it actually has the best rendering I know about what a sunset looks like right now, out of my bedroom window, and out of the window of a lot of these people out here in the backyards, where we actually see a sunset. And when these lights come in, we will no longer see a sunset. There'll be a huge other light coming up over San Marin High School, the sun's setting, and these lights come on, and we will no longer see a sunset. We will no longer see the stars or the Milky Way or planets. And that's significant. And you guys say there's no significant impact from these lights. Now, I have another thing, since you don't have a rendering. There's what it looks like about from 80 feet tall. We could have more copies of this if you really want. And basically, everyone within sight of this picture will be seeing those lights. You can see my bedroom window from this picture, but you're all going to be seeing these lights. They're 80 feet tall, and it's way up on a hill, 10 foot up off San Marin. San Marin's way higher than the rest of the city. The whole city is going to see them, and you say there's no significant impact from these lights. What's the impact on birds and everything else? Also traffic. You say there's no significant impact from traffic. There's going to be dozens to hundreds of cars. If you go out to San Marin Drive right now, it's pretty quiet. There are very few cars. At 9 o'clock, everything's closed in the neighborhood. The stores are closed. And you say there's not going to be any impact on a Friday night with hundreds of cars honking and people yelling and screaming and having a great time? You know, the crowd noise and stuff's not going to have an impact on our neighborhood? I mean, it's hard to believe. So you say that there's no less than significant impact on views, on aesthetics of these huge towers in front of Mount Burdell, of lighting glare and glow. There's less than significant impact on air pollution of all these cars and greenhouse gases. Construction noise, less than significant impact from the neighbors. And traffic, less than significant impact. And the only thing is a little bit of crowd noise. Thank you.
Janice Gannon.
Good evening. My name is Janice Gannon, and I live on San Felipe Way, directly across from the school. And I am opposed to permanent lights and 80-foot and 30-foot light towers at San Marin High School. As neighbors of the school, we are open to discussing alternatives and to finding a solution that works for all residents of Novato. There are many reasons for my dissent of this project, which include the following. 80-foot light towers are out of character for the neighborhood and for Marin County. 80-foot towers are as tall as an 8-story building. These will be seen far and wide, both night and day, and will destroy the beauty of Mount Burdell. These 80 and 30 architectural schematics or artistic renderings of the lights project offered by the NUSD, nor have the 80 and 30-foot wood structures been placed around the field so residents can have a true picture of the process. The real best cost of ticket sales, but what if those realized? Who pays for this? And there's no real funding for this project, just a lot of wishful thinking at this point. And with declining student enrollment, a looming education budget crisis in California, and a proposed federal system for vouchers to use public money for private schools, we do not know